Hey guys, so today's episode is going to be a little different. Not really going to be any awesome videos of Roxy if that's what you're looking for. I'm so sorry, but there's like another 5 episodes to watch. Though she is in my lap actually, so you know what? We're gonna show some Roxy. Hey, you say hi. Hi. Say hi. Say hi. Raw. Oh. Say hi. Hello, people. I had mentioned before in previous videos that I wanted to interview one of my best friends who currently lives in Shanghai. Of course, everybody knows, this whole COVID-19 business started in China. And so she was one of the first ones, at least from my group of, friends and family, that had to go through quarantine and lockdown and everything and is on the other side of it, which is essentially the new normal until we find a vaccine or Lord knows what's going to happen. But I wanted to get her perspective. I wanted to hear her timeline. And yeah, so this episode is going to be our conversation about everything that she's experienced. So buckle in because it's a long chat.
Avoid legal snags by telling people that they're being recorded. All right.
So, I understand that I am being recorded.
Well, I would just start with the, thank you for joining us here, Kirsty, on this wonderful day.
Okay.
There you go. Now you know you're being recorded.
I'm being recorded.
Yeah. Well, why don't we start with having you introduce yourself to these fine people of the YouTubes and
okay.
Where you live, what you do, the good stuff.
Okay. Well, my name's Kirsten, and I live in Shanghai, China. I work in a boutique consulting firm where, long story short, we help like cities or small regions attract companies to come build their factories and whatnot in that city. So it's a global company, and I'm just based in the Shanghai office. I've known Marisa for ever. We met when we were 14 about.
14, yeah.
And then we were in the same like really tight group of friends all through high school, and that group of friends is still really tight, even though we're living like all over. And then Marisa and I lived together all 4 years of college, and she didn't kill me, which is a good sign because I probably earned it. And soon, well, she's laughing because she knows it's true. And soon after college, I moved to China. So I first came to China in 2008, which was when we were still in university. And then I moved here in January 2010 to Shanghai. Since 2010, I went back to the US for a short period of time for grad school. So I've lived in China 7 years, over 10 years. I've lived in not only Shanghai, but also Hangzhou, Ningbo, and Chengdu. So Hangzhou and Ningbo are just south of Shanghai. They're about an hour and a half away by high-speed train. And then Chengdu is like way in the west, nowhere close at all. So those are the places I've lived, and I've kind of been all over. I've had gobs of jobs. This is the job I'm doing now, but I've done everything from stage events management to working in diabetes centers to doing food and beverage brand strategy to what I'm doing now. And if you're really that interested, we can have like coffee and chat about it some other time. And I have this cat, Lara, which I rescued off the streets. So she was a tough street cat, can't you tell?
Yeah. You can only see her butt at the moment. Maybe a little bit further,
Little face.
A little more.
That's her face.
That's her face. There. Oh, look at that precious fur baby.
Little fur baby. And I'm currently fostering this little fur baby who she has a disability, so her back hips are kind of broken, but she's all full of love.
She's beautiful.
She's beautiful and a snuggle buddy, and I hope to help her find a forever home. So that's my little family here.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, yes, Kirsty has been living the life in the fast lane here over in China. And I do remember, very vaguely at this point, because it feels like it was a million years ago, like the first whispers of the coronavirus, of COVID-19. And of course, my first concern was you, because you're, like around the corner.
Yeah.
It was like 900 kilometers away, right? Wuhan.
Yeah, it was about 900 kilometers to the west, which for most people in Europe sounds like, wow, that's like 8 countries away from me. But since I grew up in the United States, that doesn't feel that far from me.
No.
And so
So
yeah.
why don't you talk about from your perspectives? I mean, for us, we're very, very separated in Europe and from the U.S. Like, well, what our impressions were, but what were yours? Because from you guys, you obviously heard it first. And what did you hear? What were your impressions?
So I came back from Christmas. I was in the US for Christmas. I arrived back in Shanghai on January 1st, and I've been in China since January 1st without leaving. And I went to Beijing on a work trip from January 7th through 10th. So I've been back in Shanghai since the 10th. And I know I heard about it after that because I was not concerned at all or any of that while I was traveling. There were no concerns. There was no warnings or anything on like the transport, and people were not compulsively wearing masks. And by the way, wearing a mask in public is not out of the ordinary at any time of the year, or and usually people wear masks when they are sick. So if I have a cold, I will wear a mask so I don't get other people sick. So I'm just going to put that out there now. All the people who've been naysaying wearing masks, it doesn't work, the primary purpose of wearing a mask is to keep you from getting other people sick. And if everyone's wearing a mask, then it works. So okay, that like speech out of the way. So no, like the only people wearing masks were the couple of people who had a cold or allergies or whatever. Nothing out of the ordinary. So I get back and I kind of get settled, and we're getting ready for Chinese New Year, and probably the week after that, so maybe around like the 12th or 15th, we started hearing that there was something going on in Wuhan. Mostly I was hearing about it on a Chinese social media app called WeChat, which is gigantic in China, but if you're not in China, you probably haven't heard of it. It's sort of like Twitter meets Instagram meets WhatsApp all rolled into one. And it's also a mobile phone payment system. So it's also your wallet. So it's kind of everything on your phone. And so I was seeing people posting some things about this, but it just seemed like the flu, like another flu or something like that. So I wasn't really worried. But folks were sort of winding down. Business was winding down, getting ready for Chinese New Year. Chinese New Year holiday began on the 24th. The 21st is when Wuhan went on lockdown. So the 18th was when it started to become real, but it was still mostly real for Wuhan, and they were getting the city ready for lockdown. And then it was like, okay, the public transport in Wuhan closed down, and we were getting messages about it. And around this time, a friend of mine in Hangzhou who runs a social media platform for expats, he's Chinese, but he runs it for expats, was publishing with updates every couple hours the number of cases and where in China. So starting around the 18th or 20th, I was checking 2 to 3 times a day the reported cases in China by city. It was by city. So I was pretty aware when the first reported case landed in Shanghai. And so everything started closed down. Chinese New Year holiday began on the 24th. And in China, we have what are called migrant workers. So these are people who live in smaller cities elsewhere in China, and they go to the big cities for work. And if they're construction workers, then they're living in these temporary barracks. So like dormitory living, like the worst case scenario for something like coronavirus. But they all went back to their hometown for Chinese New Year. So I haven't seen this written anywhere, and I don't know if it was intentional, but why China waited until most of the country had returned home for Chinese New Year before lockdown. So that way, people who were in these temporary housing units in other cities were back home in a more stable home environment. A lot of these cities, these smaller cities, they'll have the elderly parents, and the grandchildren will stay behind while the working adults go somewhere else for work. Those working adults are now back, and they were home to help care for the elderly and the children. So it worked out really well to make sure that there weren't a lot of displaced people. So even if, okay, I'm home with the in-laws and it's like, familial strife and all the fun things that happen at holidays, at least physically, most people in the country were in a stable home environment where they could stay home, and the elderly who have living family were not left alone for the most part. It's not 100% case. That's, across the board. And especially Wuhan did not have that, because people who were trying to return home for Chinese New Year were not allowed into the city. And people who are migrant workers in Wuhan were not able to leave. So Wuhan's a different setup and the surrounding cities near Wuhan. But outside of Wuhan, people were able to get home and get stabilized where they were. It was pretty clear going into this that I was going to ride it out here. Yeah, I made that decision. I had the option to go back to the US. I chose to stay for a lot of reasons. Part of it is I did not want to accidentally bring this back to the United States. And I really didn't want to expose my family to it, because my parents, they're starting to understand that they're older now and that they are an at-risk group.
Yeah.
They still think they're 24, and bless them. My dad has a brand new hip, so on average he is getting younger. But no, you're not a safe cohort. I did not want to expose my parents to this. And didn't want to spread it out of the country. And we didn't know much about this virus. So we didn't know how it was being spread. We didn't know what the supposed death rate would be. And I from the very beginning, we were being told that this could be human to human transmission. So I've heard that there's been some, like, they didn't say this, they didn't say that, whatever, in Western media. I'm telling you, from January, we knew that it could be transmitted, or had the potential to be transmitted, from human to human. That it originated probably in animals. We were pretty aware that it was from the Wuhan wet market, central wet market, even before Chinese New Year. I know, before February 2nd, there was talk about it possibly coming from a particular animal called the pangolin. And there was already calls for ending of animal trafficking, and for wild animals and basically non-cattle,
livestock.
Animal farm, non-livestock. And a lot of those laws have passed. So, okay, so now we're getting into end of January. So on January 26th, I doctored myself up, mask, gloves to go outside, sunglasses, hat, coat, everything I had. And I did a massive grocery run, and I just got stuff. And I was thinking, okay, things that have long shelf life, but also have decent nutrients and are also things that I can reasonably cook with. I wasn't thinking creativity yet. I was thinking
you only think creativity near the end, where you're like, crap, I have toast, goat cheese, and a pear. Shit.
Oh no, I got creative pretty fast, but the creativity was, I get to go shopping every couple days. I was thinking I was going to be in my apartment, no leaving my apartment for weeks. I was prepared for that.
Right. Sure.
But it turned out where I was living, I'd call it quarantine light. The rules were, as long as I was wearing a mask and didn't have a fever, I could go out and go into grocery stores, and there just couldn't be any large gatherings, and most places were closed. So there wasn't anywhere I could go anyway. The only facilities that were open, oh, bless you, Kat. The only facilities that were open were grocery stores, utilities, pharmacies, and hospitals. That's it. So, it's parties at the grocery store. So, hey, Granny, hey. Yeah, and they take your temperature before you're allowed in. So if you had even a slightly high fever, you were not allowed in the grocery store or any of those places, except the hospital. Go to the hospital if you have a fever. So I got stocked up and I got ready to stay put. But really, a lot of people took the measures even a little bit more than what we were required. So, for instance, I left my apartment once every 3 days. So I did start to get creative. I was getting into baking and getting supplies and getting more daring with my baking experiments and different kinds of cooking and things like that because the only place I could go was the grocery store. Um,
Right.
So, but I did have a lot of fun with that. Other cities were a lot more extreme. So Hangzhou, where I used to live and have a lot of friends,
Mhm.
they had the rule that only one person per household was allowed to leave once every 2 days to buy essential goods.
Okay.
And my friend who was there took a photo. He had this pass slip where it was like, 29th, 30th, 31st, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and it had a box. And to leave your compound, the compound, they're called Baoan. It's like security guard, but it's a security guard empowered by your community organization group. So it's like security guard plus. They had to sign you out. And then you had to come back in, and only people who lived in your compound were allowed to come into the compound. So if you got deliveries, usually deliveries would come to your apartment door. Now they had to be dropped off at the compound gate, and then you had to come to the gate and pick them up. Worked really well because it helped keep the deliverymen safe. And it made it possible for people who could not leave their compounds to continue to get food deliveries, to get other kinds of deliveries and whatnot.
Yeah.
There,
And
there weren't
that
really
also helped.
shortages. Yeah.
That also helped with like local community, well, like local restaurants, because you had mentioned that that really
Yeah.
helped a lot of restaurants where obviously you couldn't go in anymore, but as long as they could deliver, they had the supply to meet like to meet.
Yeah. And I know lots of places in the world have food delivery and apps and whatnot, but not like China. Unless it literally is like China. I mean, like, Singapore. But I mean, like,
Right.
Singapore has this, Japan has this, East Asia. Okay, I'll say like East Asia. Like people in New York, like, well, I have this. Like, no, not like this.
Yeah.
I have on my phone, without even downloading them, I have 4 food delivery apps that just came with my phone. Okay. My phone's 2 years old. All right. So, um, that's not including each restaurants who have individual food delivery options, because some of them now have their own apps just for their own restaurant.
Wow.
So yeah, food delivery was like big time for prepared meals. A lot of restaurants closed, but the ones that were able to stay open, um, they were closed for a little bit, and some of them were able to reopen, but only for delivery. And again, this is to keep people safe, to keep the spread down.
Right.
But there was this balance of we got to lock people down, but people still need to eat, So,
Absolutely.
and I think they did a really good job of that. And there were a lot of like experiments in other ways of delivering parcels of food. So it's called a xiaochu, which is like a little district in Chinese. That is your community, and each xiaochu has a xiaochu zhongxin, a center just for that, and they are the community organizers. And some of these communities that have lots of elderly, they did not want their elderly to go out. So they organized packaged food drop-offs of like vegetables and eggs and cooking oil and rice and lentil or whatever, that these packaged I keep thinking of Chinese words for it. Like bags, grocery bags of food. So that way their residents did not have to leave. And my compound, like almost all my neighbors are like over 70. So I was also terrified that I'm gonna like go out, bring this home, and kill all my neighbors. It's like,
Right.
So that's why I was also shutting myself in.
Right.
And I saw some of these coming to my neighborhood. I didn't partake in it, but yeah, and it was really beautiful to see how well that kind of organization was working.
Yeah, that is awesome. That is something that like for us, in Germany we're technically like partial lockdown. I mean, pretty much everything is closed, of course,
Yeah.
except like how it was for you guys with the essential like hospitals and even with the doctor's office, because like one thing that I thought was really cool in Germany is when you are sick, you go to the doctor and then the doctor decides how long you're sick. And then they write a slip, and then your employer pretty much has no say. So this is very different from the U.S. system. But because of this, like of course the doctors, they didn't know how to like go about if they were getting infected people, especially because in their little practices, especially out here in the boonies, like you have like this 1 or 2 country doctors, they're usually like the last to know about some of these things, I feel like, because they're, very, very far removed. And, what do they do? What kind of PPE do they need to protect themselves? Not just, the client, the patients that come in. So the parliament passed a law that, you always had to call the doctor anyway to make an appointment. And you did kind of mention what your symptoms were. But in this case, the doctor could literally do it over the phone. That, okay, well, you're sick, you're staying home. We don't have to physically see each other. And then I think somebody would at least find, like, they would deliver the paperwork for you, or there'd be a way to get that necessary paperwork that you need to give to your employer. Not a problem. Mm-hmm. But they made it work out that the doctor doesn't necessarily have to see you. And then if you did feel like that you had COVID-19, they would actually bring people, from what I've heard, like in cars, would come to your house and test you. Since Germany has one of the highest testing rates in the world, as far as I know. And that was one of the things that they did, because they really did not want you to leave the house at all. They thought that you had it, that was it. And then they also got the list of everybody you were in contact with for the last 10 days, and all of them were automatically sent into quarantine. No, that was it. Which has, it's been really good how, like, they have been on it since our day one.
So some things that China did to help with that is they didn't want the whole healthcare system to become overwhelmed with just COVID treatment. So they designated fever hospitals. Okay. Per district, there was one fever hospital. And if you presented a fever, you were to go there. So that left the rest of the hospitals open to take care of heart attacks and bicycle accidents, whatever. Mm-hmm. And they were very clear about that. And they also noted which ones were able to provide care in English for foreigners. Okay. And I saw this published from multiple cities. So it wasn't just Shanghai. Lots of cities did this. Mm-hmm. Other things they did, China very early on said testing and treatment is free. Mm-hmm. They didn't want anything to hold people back from identifying as a potential COVID case. Right. And they also, like, at least in Shanghai, if you had a recent history of traveling through Wuhan, you were to, report this to your community organization, and they would help facilitate however it was. I'm not exactly sure that process because I've never been to Wuhan. Right. So it didn't count for me. Then the other thing that Shanghai did, and let me get this open, is they created an app to prove that you have been in the city for 14 days or 30 days without 14 days without leaving. So there are two wallets, if you will, on your phone. There's the WeChat wallet, and then there's Alipay. And through them, they know where you've been, where you've checked in with your apps and you've paid and whatnot. So they can prove that I have been in Shanghai for 14 days.
A little bit more over other. Right there, a little bit. Yeah, that's good enough. We don't need to see all your info. There you go. Yeah.
You're not. All you're seeing is evidence that I have been in Shanghai for 14 days. So, so for people who had returned, so first people returning to Shanghai, these are people who had left for Chinese New Year and were coming back. They were returning from other parts of China, and once you'd returned from other parts of China, you had to self-quarantine for 14 days at home. Mm-hmm. And your community organizer would make sure you did that. And then when you completed it, you'd get a certificate. You've completed your 14 days quarantine, and you get the green QR code, and you're allowed to go around. And people returning from other countries, at first it was only if you were returning from an affected country. And then it was becoming, everyone. And now no foreigners are allowed to enter China. And China has completely reduced the passenger load to, for foreign airline carriers, one passenger plane per week, one passenger plane per week. And for Chinese carriers, one passenger plane from each country destination back to China. And they're limiting which cities they're allowed to land in. And then on top of that, they said it doesn't matter if you have a pre-existing active visa residency permit. If you are not a Chinese citizen, you cannot board those planes, with few exceptions like diplomats or whatever. There was some outcry among expats saying, oh, it's racist, it's this, it's that. I didn't read it as xenophobia. I read it as, okay, we don't have the capacity to quarantine all of these people in centralized quarantine, because that's what it is now, centralized quarantine. Everyone coming back, centralized quarantine. I think some cases might still get home quarantine, but for the most part, it's centralized quarantine. So they first reduced the total volume of people coming in. And then they want to prioritize taking care of Chinese citizens. So they said only Chinese citizens can get those seats. It makes sense to me. And then when the rest of the world kind of figures this situation out, then that will open back up. An unintended consequence of that, though, is right now there's actually been a big wave of xenophobia and 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 racism against foreigners, and I've been on the receiving end of that. It's not been extreme. It's been more like there's memes out talking about foreign trash and taking out the foreign trash because recently, last year, China started enacting trash sorting laws. So it was like taking the foreigners and sorting them for whatever their bad behavior is. But it's like, what are you talking about?
What is it? Yeah. That's like, it's just people like that will come up, look for whatever trash excuse to be assholes.
And I've actually gotten more of my neighbors and Chinese friends and even like Chinese acquaintances who have said more to me about how those xenophobic people are stupid than I've actually received xenophobia. So like an example would be whatever, it doesn't matter. It's it's a fear reaction because the majority of the cases now in China, actually all that I know of, all the reported cases I know of, new cases, are people arriving by plane. And 90% of those, before this cutoff, 90% of those were Chinese people coming back. Only 10% of those cases were actual foreigners. But when you read that news alert, oh, all the new cases are being imported from overseas, it's really easy for people to just assume, oh, these foreigners think China's safe, now they're fleeing to China and they're bringing it with them. That was the mindset. That was the reaction. Yeah. When really it's like overseas students who are coming home. Because the U.S. State Department issued on February 3rd a statement to everyone to U.S. citizens to come home by commercial means. And maybe even earlier than that.
They have, and I know in Germany, because there are a lot of other YouTubers, like American students that are studying abroad in Germany. Literally the German government, I'm pretty sure, kicked them out. Like they were told by the U.S. government they could come home, and they had the option. But I think the German government in the end was like, you know what, guys, it would be best for you to be home. Like, it's not like we don't want you here, but it's where would you want to be in a pandemic if you had the option? And like, especially when you're young and you're in college, I would want to be home with my family, even if the healthcare in America sucks.
Well, China didn't kick out students. It wasn't like that, or even require them to leave. So I have a friend who is a university student at a major university in Shanghai, and their lockdown is so extreme. It's the school, it's the university, it's not the city, it's the university. If they're living in the dormitory, they are only allowed to go outside the dormitory for 90 minutes a day. That's leave the dormitory building. They take all their meals, they do their online classes, they do all of that. 90 minutes a day. That's all they get outside. And I'm just like,
that's Paris
even
right
now. Even now, that is still the rule.
That's hard. Like in Paris right now, it's from what I've seen, it's 60 minutes a day.
We haven't had a new case in Shanghai that wasn't arriving on a plane in weeks.
Yeah.
And that's still
that's hard.
So like,
really
hard. People are saying China's back to normal. It's like, no.
No,
this is not normal.
Yeah. I mean, for us also, I mean, we're kind of still in the, Germany is also a very unique case. I mean, our numbers are very, very different. I mean, we are, I think, like the fourth highest, I think, number of cases, but our death or our fatality rate is still like just over 2,000. And
what's more, your borders are a lot harder to monitor.
Yeah, well, they did change that though. They did change that. The borders they were closed. The borders are I don't know if they're still closed, but I mean they have been closed. It was actually harder to get into Poland than the other way around. So like there is a pile up on the Autobahn from Germany into Poland of all the semi trucks, because like you have like the A6 and stuff that, well, A6 goes into Czech Republic, but like farther north up towards Poland, you have, like you have, since Germany's right in the middle, we have, semis going back and forth between like Eastern Europe through, France.
Mm-hmm.
And there was like a 50-kilometer pileup of semis, because the Polish border was like that insane to check every single car, and everyone that had fevers. Like, it was the same thing. If you had a fever, you were not allowed into Poland. And there's we've been having problems with, well, I mean, things are worked out now, but there was like a problem we came across in the beginning was the fact that we have a lot of Polish doctors that work in Germany, and it's like, oh, okay, can they come? But if they come, are they going to be able to go back? Like, since Germany has the higher number of cases, we need them at the moment. But of course, what happens if like, things go for the worse in Poland? Of course, they're going to want to go back. And like, there was that. And then I know and then there's also a lot of like nurses and caretakers that help with the elderly in Germany. And a lot of them are Romanian or Polish or from Eastern Europe. And so that was another problem. And a lot of them were like, we'll just come to Germany and we will just stay here and we'll ride it out, which is, I think it's fantastic. But I mean, it's they need to, they want to keep their jobs. They want to help continue to take care of these people, which is great. And then the other problem is with our own migrant workers, because asparagus season is upon us here in Germany, and that's like,
I read about that.
Yeah, it's like the holy food in Germany. And I was seeing this on Facebook. They were asparagus farmers. They're like, we need help because our migrant workers aren't allowed to leave their country to come. I'm like, but I mean, they made it work. I mean, asparagus, it's happening. The asparagus is out. But
there will be asparagus.
There will be asparagus, yes. Of course, like, unfortunately, none of, I'm used to going to like restaurants here where like they change all their menus to be like asparagus themed. None of us are going to enjoy that anytime soon. So, oh well, it is what it is. I mean, like, it's one of those things where it's like, you go through this and you're like, I don't know, like, I mean, for us, I guess, I feel I'm in a very privileged position that, you were able to also work at home. Once your work started back up, I'm going to have you like talk about that briefly, because I know in the beginning it was like absolute lockdown, and then or like you couldn't leave and then you were able to kind of work from home. But like for us, we're still able to work from home. Like, I live out in the country too, so like me going outside is not a problem, except for random people from other villages that try using my village for their outdoor walk. I've seen you all. I know you. Get out of my village, man.
Actually, if Marisa doesn't know you, you're not part of her village.
Yeah. I was actually thinking about that. There's a problem with that, because everybody in the village knows who I am, because I'm the resident foreigner. If our like, village is 200 people.
I am too.
Yeah, right. Everybody knows whose wife I am. But then I see all these people, I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
So for all I know, there's some people that they are. I mean, there was one guy that was walking his Saint Bernard. I'm like, I know there's no Saint Bernard in our village, so I know you are a foreigner or you're a tourist.
So my compound probably has my compound itself, Taihefang, probably has 200 people who live in it, and then the Xiaochu, the little district that I live in, probably has 1,000 or more people.
Okay.
So in my compound, I'm one of 3 foreigners, and the other 2 foreigners left. So I was the foreigner.
You were the foreigner.
I was the foreigner who was here the whole time. But there was this like solidarity, because all my neighbors are, not only are they Chinese, they are Shanghainese. They were born, their parents were born, their grandparents were born here. There's still very much a place as far as the city where you're from in China. So a lot of the people who live in Shanghai are not Shanghainese. They're Chinese, but they're not Shanghainese. My neighbors are all Shanghainese, and they saw me living here with them, following the quarantine, following the rules, doing all the things that I should do. And I could see they appreciated me following the rules. So like another thought before we get into like the work part, I've seen some people saying, oh, well, quarantine worked in China because China has a very controlling government and the rules for breaking it were really strict. If it was fear of being punished, then there would have been a lot of police in the street and there would have been fear of the police. There were less police in the streets during quarantine. They were not going out. The police were social distancing too.
Yeah.
And people were following the rules. There wasn't fear. There wasn't even panic buying. I never had a shortage of toilet paper. That was not even, there was no problem with that. Right?
Yeah.
So, so those kinds of things, it was more just, okay, this is what the city is doing. My community, the different communities would even have their own different rules within. Like my community issued these little passes with a stamp on it that while only residents of my community were allowed in, if you left, you had to take a pass. So that when you came back, if there was a new bout on, you didn't have to prove to him that you lived there. You just show him the pass and he knows you're allowed in. He takes your temperature and lets you in. So I actually didn't take any time off work. I was working from home the whole time. So the Chinese New Year holiday ended on the 30th of January. So I was supposed to be back at work in office the 31st. While the Chinese government was still trying to grapple what the heck is going on, their first thing was to extend the Chinese New Year holiday through February 1st.
Okay.
So February 2nd was the quote first day back. But as on February 1st, they issued another rule. You were not allowed to return to your place of work until February 9th.
Okay.
So I could start working, but I could not go to my office.
Gotcha.
And then as we approached February 9th, they created special rules that if you qualified, your office could reopen.
Okay.
We didn't qualify. So some factories went back to work with partial employee load. Because remember, a lot of their employees had left to go home for holiday.
Right.
And we're not back yet.
Right.
And they had to pass all kinds of different other rules. Like they had to have been in that city for 14 days, not just return. They had to be there 14 days without symptoms. So, there kept being all these different rules. We started to get approval to reopen our office on February 19th. So on February 19th, 3 of us were allowed to return to the office. Well, there were only 3 of us in the city, so that was everyone. Everyone else was outside the city. So I started going back to office February 19th, and then the following Monday, technically we were open for all employees who were allowed to return to work individually. So that means they had been in Shanghai for more than 14 days and did not present a fever. That still was only the 3 of us. So slowly, other employees have been trickling back. I still have one colleague who's stuck in Mongolia. She's from Bulawatar. She's Mongolian, but she can't get back in. She can't get back in. So she's still working from home.
At least she's able to do that, though. I mean, I cannot imagine her being stuck and not being able to do anything. Oof.
Yeah,
I mean,
So
my company is also doing something similar. I mean, for us, our company, because we're in the pharma industry, we're still considered essential. But they also have taken a lot of measures because since for us, we're still in the midst of it. In our teams, no more than 50% are allowed in the building or on campus because we're several buildings at one time. So our boss has to coordinate, and if everybody else, if only if you absolutely have to come in, if you're able to work from home, you can come in. Otherwise, work from home. Yeah, because we do have people that work in production we do film machines. So they have to come in. They can't work from home. So of course it's to make sure the the least amount of people are there that absolutely have to be there, and everybody else is just not really essential. And then the other thing I really like was our cafeteria, for example. They closed it, of course, but they do have it that they do provide lunch, but everything is pre-packed and to take away.
Nice.
And so that way, the people there, they're still working, but they're also protected because they are limiting their exposure to other employees. And with the food that's prepackaged, then you don't have to worry about, say, if one of them is asymptomatic, then they're not accidentally passing it on to somebody else because it's or at least it's not on the food itself, because you can always clean the plastic packaging outside of it and stuff. So and it's really good. We haven't had any cases yet, but we are very vigilant. I mean, we've had some actually. So we haven't had cases on site. We've had cases of some people that were out during business trips, but of course they figured out before they even came back. I think some of them, there's like I think three cases. I think maybe that they went ahead and got tested even before, but they were all sent home in quarantine. They were not allowed on campus. That was no go. And for some of them that had been in contact with some other employees, they were also immediately notified and they were automatically put into quarantine. So yeah, I'm glad with how we're able to do things. I know a lot of people are not that lucky, but I feel safe. Like I actually went into work on Tuesday just to kind of see how things were, and I was like, nobody there. My boss was there and like one other person, and then I told them, all right, I'm here. Don't expect to see me for another couple weeks because I'm not coming back in.
So when we started back to work, it was pretty strict. Mm-hmm. So for me to leave my apartment at all, I had to have a mask. For me to ride the metro, for me to go into any public space, I had to wear a mask. Mm-hmm. So I leave my apartment with a mask on. I leave my compound, say good morning to my bow on, walk to the metro. Enter the metro, they take my temperature. Ding. I get on the metro, and I'm supposed to use my phone to scan a QR code to register which metro car I was on and when. I didn't do this every day because I didn't realize that's what they wanted me to do because it was all in Chinese, and I can read it, but it's really hard and I have to try, and it's the morning and I didn't have, anyway, I don't think many people are actually doing this, but it's there. All right. So you get on, you scan a QR code. And then when I get off the metro, they take my temperature again. Mm-hmm. And then I walk to my building about 10, 15 minutes. I enter my building. They take my temperature when I enter the building. And then I go up to my office, and I have to, when I enter my office, sanitize my hands and self-report my temperature there. My office also provides me with 1 surgical mask per day. I am to wear my surgical mask inside the whole day. So the way we work it is I have my own office that I can close the door and isolate. My boss has his own. So when we are in our own offices by ourselves, we can take our mask off. But if I'm in a space with another colleague, I wear my mask at all times. And we still do this. We're still doing this. It's been over a month and a half, and this is still the protocol. Okay, so in the AM, I take my temperature. In the PM, I take my temperature and self-report again in my office every day that I'm in the office. If I leave the office to go to lunch, this is back in the beginning, most of the restaurants were closed at this point, but if I went to like a convenience store to get some food, they took my temperature. When I returned to my office building, they took my temperature, right? So now we're up to 7. So let's see. Get on the metro, get off the metro, get in my building, self-report in the morning, self-report in the afternoon, go into a convenience store, return into my building. Then when I go home, I get on the metro, take my temperature, get off the metro, they take my temperature, and I enter my apartment compound, they take my temperature. So just to go to work and come home, I had my temperature taken 10 times. That's not include. Yeah. Yeah. That's not including if I went to a grocery store or anything else. If I did anything else, when the restaurant started to open again, they would take your temperature when you came in, take your phone number and your name, and check your green QR code. And then you were allowed to come into the restaurant, sit down and have a meal and take your mask off. The first time I did that, I felt naked. I felt very vulnerable, and I felt like people walking on the streets who could look in the window and see me and see my face. It really felt uncomfortable because there was this sentiment like, you're not wearing a mask. What is wrong with you? Protect people. Put on your mask. But I'm like, no, I did everything I was supposed to do. Just let me have my tacos. I went for tacos. That was my first meal in a restaurant, was tacos.
Yeah, that's kind of how we are. I mean, like we only go grocery shopping once a week. because we really, really, especially with my mother-in-law, because she is 77 with heart problems. So, I mean, for us, we're very vigilant with her. And like, we even kind of isolate ourselves from her too, as much as we can, because we could easily be symptomatic. We have no asymptomatic. We have no idea. And we just don't want to run any risks. And so the few times that we have gone to the grocery store, we even time it. We'll look on Google, you know, like Google Maps, and be like, okay, when's, you know, our grocery store, when it has the least amount of people, and we'll go then, you know, to try anything to do that. And like, and being around people for the first time, because we're so used to just it being like really just my husband and I, and sometimes my mother-in-law, you know, it's just three of us. So then being around other people, we're just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable. Oh my God, oh my God. Because we haven't gotten to the mask part yet. Like we're not, that's not there yet. We, you know, we're still trying to just flatten the curve, and then we'll, you know, we're going to talk about what our new normal is going to be. And I can see it being somewhere, not with the temperature measuring thing. We haven't, I'm surprised we haven't, well, I don't know. I feel like if we'll get there, I don't know, but I can see us also requiring to wear masks in the future.
Well, the temperature checking started January 27th.
Mm-hmm.
Like right away. Boom,
Right,
boom.
right.
Because like we still didn't know anything about this virus.
Right.
Like there were a lot of reports coming out, you know, comparing it to MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, which has a 33% death rate. We were prepared for a 33% death rate.
Yeah.
That's what we were expecting.
Right. That's
right.
And SARS too, right? SARS is also about over 30%. It's somewhere
SARS
around.
is not that high, but it is higher.
Right. It's higher than COVID.
I can't quote it off the top of my head because MERS is the one that was just like
right
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like China was like, look, I know that actually we didn't know. We hypothesized that there were asymptomatic carriers, but the thought in China was, we're going to do everything.
Right.
Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work, but if it's something we have done before, we're going to do it all. Okay, we're going to find everyone who has a fever and we're going to test them. And if they test positive, we're going to isolate them.
Right.
We're going to check everyone's temperature all the time. And if you have a fever, we're going to test you. And then if you're hot, isolate you. So, you know, it's like, okay, yeah, a lot of people are carriers and are asymptomatic. But you know what? When I went grocery shopping, I knew for a fact that no one in that place had a fever. And it did make me stay calm, even if all it did was help me stay calm. And like putting on the mask, and like when I went out, I didn't wear rubber gloves. I just wore gloves because it was winter time, because it was January and February. It was cold out. But the gloves made me cognizant of what I was touching. So I was more careful about touching things that I didn't have to touch. Or do I want to hold the grocery cart? Take the hand. I took the hand gel that every grocery store had a hand gel pump. Then go to the cart and I'd rub down the cart handle before I'd go around the grocery store. Or do you touch fruit and put it back if you don't want it? Right? When you're in the produce. It's like, no, if I touch the fruit, I need to take it, because if I'm asymptomatic,
oh well.
Yeah. But like, I didn't want to put my own germs back in there. And you know, and having the mask kept me from touching my face. If anything, you know, it just made me more aware of everything I was doing. Like, I already take my shoes off at the door, but I was extra careful about not wearing my shoes anywhere further in. When I took off my gloves and coat, how I took off my mask so that I could wash my hands without recontaminating stuff. Like it just made me very, very aware.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, like with my years as a microbiologist, I'm so used to going from contaminated into clean rooms, sterile clean rooms. So I already had, you know, like my process. And I had to think about, like, when I went to work, I thought about, okay, so I'm going into work and I'm going to consider work the most contaminated place, and home is the least contaminated place. So, okay, I go to work normally fine, but then I have to think about, how am I going to, you know, slowly kind of decontaminate myself as I come home. So like, for example, I had my bag. I purposely went for a smaller bag. I didn't go with my normal work bag, and I had alcohol spray. So at the end of the day, I sprayed everything and I put it in the bag, so that and then closed the bag so that everything in the bag was clean. Sprayed the outside of the bag. Well, I left work. Before I got into my car, I sprayed the bag, put it in the car. Sprayed my coat, put it in the car. Like I had my clothes, fine, whatever. That was going to be the first thing I took off as soon as I got home. Put it straight in the hamper and took a shower. And then I went to it's called the Getränkeladen. So it's a place where you buy drinks in bulk. Because the husband went over to the grocery store, and I went ahead to go to the drink place because even before COVID-19, it was one that I can count on one hand the number of people I saw there on a regular basis. So I was like, I can go there even after work. There's not going to be many people. It's going to be fine. And as predicted, I went there. There's hardly anybody, but I did have to use their cart because I had like 6 cases of empty bottles that I had to give back and rebuy. So sprayed the hell out of that. Went and got what I needed. Sprayed each case before I put it in the car.
Yeah.
And then I put the cart back and I sprayed the cart because I'm like, I have a feeling the next person's not going to wipe the cart, but at least I've left it clean for them. Then I got in the car, and then fortunately everything was technically in the car was clean, except and so I was able to just put everything just into the house. I didn't put anything away. I just brought it into the house, put the car away, went upstairs, took a shower, took off my clothes, everything, and then I put everything away.
Yeah, when I did my first big grocery run, stocked up on like canned food and stuff, I washed all the cans when I got home. Yep. And I used dish soap, but you know what?
Which
if
is
dish
fine.
soap is disinfectant, right? Yeah. So,
the virus has a fatty outer layer. Like that's why everybody keeps saying wash your hands, because that just washing your hands will kill the virus 100%. Like you don't need the fancy disinfectants or whatnot. Like the alcohol spray is good when you're traveling or whatnot because it evaporates quickly. Well, not too quickly. You want that 30-second contact time. But other than that, like just use soap and water. Warm water with soap is more than sufficient to like clean everything else.
Yeah.
Which is insane when you see like in the US, all the Lysol wipes are out. It's like, guys, why do you need Lysol wipes? Like
dish soap.
Soap and water. Come on.
Yeah. I wonder how are our like regular habits going to be permanently affected? Like things like I don't like touching doorknobs, or if it's a push door. Yeah, if it's a push door, I push it with my elbows.
I use my hip. I'll use my elbow turn because fortunately a lot at work our handles are handles, not knobs. Well, I don't want to I have to go. I have to confront a knob, but with a handle, elbow, and then with the hip. And then if I have to pull it, then I usually just take a Kleenex or something and then use that and just immediately throw that away.
I have perfected the push the elevator button with my elbow.
You can use your knuckle.
Yeah, but then I'm like knuckle, but then I do this. So I'm like, or I put it in my pockets. So I'm like, nope, elbow.
Elbow's good, yeah. Because in the clean rooms we were always told, only use knuckles. Like fingertips, you try to avoid that at all costs. It was always get a button, you use your knuckles.
And it's funny because a lot of the elevators in China will have signs of things you don't do on the elevator, and one of them is press the button with umbrellas, because I guess people would press the button with umbrellas and like break them. But now it's like, no, use your umbrella. Use your umbrella.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Very Mary Poppins.
Yeah. Yeah. And another part of me is like, maybe now all those people that I've always given like the evil eye because they were in a public restroom and didn't wash their hands when they left, maybe now they will.
Yeah.
They're like, people, you are the problem. Wash your hand.
Dr. Fauci in the States, he was doing some kind of interview, and he talked about, he's like, from now on, people should stop shaking hands. And yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to think about these things. We have to think about these things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's especially until we have a vaccine. Going back to normal is not going to be, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick.
And I wonder, like, are we going to freak out about normal fevers now, even after the vaccine? Like, for the rest of our lives, are we going to have a much heightened, like, anxiety response to just a common fever? Because, like, honestly, until now, if I got a fever, only if it was really extreme would I go see a doctor. The only time I have taken myself to the hospital for a fever was January 2019. I got the flu, and after 4 days of being bedridden, I went to the hospital because one, wanted to make sure I didn't have pneumonia, and two, I needed a doctor's excuse for work. And then when they were like, "You don't have pneumonia," I was like, "Great. Any drugs you think I should take? Here, you could take these." I'm like, "Great." They're like, "You sure you don't want more?" Like, "No, I'm good." I go left, and I kept self-treating at home. And then I was like, "Okay, I don't have pneumonia. I'm not about to drown in my own lungs. I'm good." And that was like, that's been my approach always. It's basically like, if I have a fever and it's below, I'm gonna use Fahrenheit. Sorry, all of you like Celsius people. If it's below 104 Fahrenheit and it lasts less than 2 days, I don't go to the hospital unless I need a doctor's note for work.
Yeah. From what I've seen, most of the people that end up going to the hospital because of COVID-19 it's because they cannot breathe. Like, mostly when it's fever, almost everybody's been able to just stay at home. So I think in terms of fever, I think we'll be okay. It is.
I think China's gonna freak out.
Oh, well, yeah, but I think also, I mean, you guys have been very aggressive with your temperature measurements. So I think, and that's why. I think because you have very heightened awareness of it. Because for us, it's the cough that we're more concerned with. So like I had a really bad cold in February, and I still have a cough. Like mid-February, it was the day after the first weekend of Carnival, and that just like I was out for about a week and a half, and I still have this cough. And when I went to work on Tuesday, my boss was like, "You still have a cough?" And I'm like, "Is it out?" At this point though, I think it's allergies. Like I live out in the farm country, where the last few weeks they've been fertilizing everything with like a little animal shit. We can't even open our windows because it smells awful. And
like,
I think
look into an Olsen. Like, all of us have asthma. Winter just goes along with bronchitis. For us, we just cough in the winter.
Yeah.
You were like, "Well, it's only been a couple." I'm like, "Tell me when it's 3 months, it's coughing season's over." Okay.
Yeah, another thing, like when I was growing up, I always had coughs and stuff. Like whenever I got sick, the cough would always be the thing that lingered. But it is typical German fashion where they always have to just kind of point out the obvious. So I'm like, yeah, I can't do anything about it, guys. Like, I am very well aware I have a cough.
Yeah.
It's coming out of my mouth.
I'm so grateful that sneezing is not a symptom, or like general allergies, because I do have pretty bad allergies in China. They haven't been as bad this year because the pollution has been non-existent.
That's awesome.
Yay. But I've had my first allergy attack, and it was all swollen and stuffed up and sneezing and gross. And I was like, "Oh, thank God, I know this isn't COVID." I would have freaked the fuck out. Am I allowed to swear in your podcast?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
You can
I would have freaked out.
I say fuck, damn, and shit, and motherfucker all the time. It's fine.
Well, all right then. I only wanted to use the one, but sure, now that I got permission.
So what other things I had on my notes, it was I pretty much covered everything that I wanted to make sure that you at least the timeline wise. But since you are like the whole reason why I wanted you on here is because you have gone through the quarantine. You have an idea of what the new normal is looking like at the moment.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what kind of words of wisdom would you have for the people? What kind of because I know people are they are wondering like, okay, we have this, but then what does the other side look like? What can we expect? And so, and also, what words of comfort can you give, since you've managed to go through mentally unscathed? I think, because I know that's also really affecting a lot of people's mental health.
We think. Jury's out. I would say, a couple of things going forward is like, people keep thinking back to like past pandemics and epidemics and like the bubonic plague and all of those. Okay, but even with shortages in healthcare, humanity's ability to confront and deal with disease is so much better than any other point in human history. So, like, you're most likely gonna be fine. Most of humanity. That was my assumption from the get-go. I will most likely be fine. And that has helped keep me calm. To keep up my vigilance of my personal hygiene and my way of like how I go about, because I also kept the assumption that I am a carrier, even if like probability and statistics say I'm not, but I behave as though I am a carrier so that I do not get other people sick just in case. So this is sort of like how I have like kept myself going. The other thing that I have tried to do is not engage in anger. A lot of people are getting very angry about a lot of different things, and at least my observation from being over here and seeing people say on Facebook or whatnot who are getting incredibly angry is I think a lot of that anger is based in fear and not logic.
Yeah.
They are getting they're feeling more than they can handle.
Yeah.
And it is now turning into anger, and then they find a logical reason to be angry. But it's not actually logic that begins the anger. So if your friends or your family or people are having a big anger response to the situation, don't try to calm them down with logic, because their anger is not from logic. Their anger is from fear. Right. See how you can help their fear. Even if you disagree with what they're angry about. This is how we can help each other. Really, the strongest response that most people are having is an emotional response. So we need to give each other emotional support through this. I do think that has been a lot of what I have seen just community-wise in China and my community. China's a big country. There's 1.4 billion people. Different cities are different. Go figure. But my community has been very emotionally supportive of each other, including the one little foreigner that they had stick around. They've been supportive for me too.
Yeah.
And other like there will be an end to this, but it is not going to be the same. And a lot of people are saying that, but I don't think it's sinking in yet. It's not going to be the same. But that doesn't mean it has to be worse.
Right.
Why don't you use the time when you're stuck at home to think about what changes can you make to make your life better? Is being at home helping you reaffirm that, yes, the work I do is my passion and you're re-energized? Or are you realizing, why am I spending 40 hours of my life doing that? There's got to be something else. Okay. Or like, wow, I didn't realize my kid likes, action figures or whatever it is, like
right.
Use it to discover what you miss when your life is busy and figure out how you want to change your life to be more of what you want going forward.
Right.
And I would say find some way to help ease somebody else's pain. It doesn't have to be COVID specific. Find one way to ease one other living being's pain. What I did is I'm fostering a cat that had been living in a cage for over a year, and now she doesn't have to live in a cage anymore. That's my way. I found one living creature, and I reduced that living creature's pain.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So if everybody found one other person or animal or whatever, and you can reduce that one being's pain, the world will be so much better after this. And you'll feel better. It feels good to help people. You're like, gee, my day had meaning. It's
Oh, that's very good. That's really awesome advice, Kirsty. Thank you so much. All right, girl. Thank you so much for joining me here. And for those of you, I probably will have mentioned it earlier in the video, but if you recognize this gorgeous face, she is from my Stockholm video, which I will link at some point, either the beginning or at this point, or probably again at this point somewhere up above. And check it out because it's a fun video, and there'll be more adventures with the two of us. So I'm excited. Anyway, so back to the studio.
So I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I definitely want to do another thank you to Kirsty for sitting down and telling us so much valuable information. Even, you know, she and I had talked a lot about this whole, what had happened as it was happening and afterwards, but I still learned a lot, even more. There's just, it's just so fascinating. So anyway, thanks for joining me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up because it lets me and YouTube know you like content like this and you want to see more. And definitely check out Kirsty on social media, or myself, but definitely check out Kirsty. If you would like to see Kirsty again on this channel, also let me know in the comments below. You know what? In fact, tell me whatever you think about this this whole situation. What do you think about our conversation? What do you think about her experiences through partial lockdown, as well as, you know, what the new normal is in Shanghai? I would love to hear your thoughts. Let me know, and until next time.